Bom dia e bem-vindos a mais uma palestra do Ciclo Internacional de Palestras Conflito, Concorrência e Cooperação na Esfera Pública Digital. Good morning. Good morning, Bruna. Good afternoon to Maik in Berlin. We are very glad to have you today. Maik Fielitz is our speaker today. He is a conflict researcher. He studied political science, history, and peace and conflict studies at the universities of Jena, Marburg, and Athens. He is head of the research department on right-wing extremism and digitalization at the Jena Institute for Democracy and Civil Society, and co-head of research at the German Federal Working Group Against Online Hate. It's called BAG gegen Hass.net. His work focuses on how digital technologies and digital cultures reshape right-wing extremism and how liberal democracies counter authoritarian tendencies in online contexts. Maik, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks a lot, Liriam, for the invitation, and hello to Brazil from Berlin, from sunny Berlin. So here it's in the afternoon already. I hope you're doing fine. I've never been to Brazil. It would have been a nice occasion, but unfortunately, I'm just here virtually. So thanks for the opportunity to share my research with you. I'm, as Liriam said, a conflict researcher, and I'm specialized on right-wing extremism in Germany, but also beyond. During the last years, I worked in several projects that were focusing on the question like how digitalization changed, also the success factors, the dynamics, and also the counteractions against radical right extremism in Germany. So what I want to present today are some insights of the work that I did during the last years, and to show you how we try methodologically also to trace the far right online in Germany, and to hope to give you some ideas also from the German context, what also for the discussion to see which parallels and differences we can see between Brazil and Germany. So I will begin my presentation. I think it's around 45 minutes that I will talk to you with some general ideas on the question what changes in the context of digitalization, the far right in Germany. And we'll go over to the next point where I present some methods how we in our daily work are approaching this challenge in monitoring also in the far right online. And then I will provide 3 different case studies that we were conducting. So we are a research unit here in Berlin where we combine data science, network analysis, and qualitative social sciences. And we made several studies. The one was on protest mobilization, on online protest mobilization. I will give you some insights how we proceeded here. I will go to the question of monetization through digital activism in far right contexts, and we'll finish the third case study on online memes. I think this is also something I know also in Brazil, very popular to communicate, especially also in the context of political extremism, to use visual communication. So I will give you some insights how we tried to analyze also this seemingly endless sea of memes and how we can make sense of this. So this is what I brought to you, and I hope it will be interesting that you can connect also in the Q&A on this. So beginning like a little introduction on the relationship of digitalization and right-wing extremism. So from a German perspective, at least, this has been a game changer, we can say, also looking back towards the last 10 years. So we had quite parallel the rise of far-right parties in Europe, the more and more transformation of political discourse into digital contexts. So there is a correlation, I don't say a causality, but at least a correlation to say that there are some mechanisms that changed also the conditions, how political prior outsiders can now also get into the political scene, get more influential. So this has largely to do that we have a restructuration of the digital public sphere, of the public sphere generally. So before we know that, or we get used to that there are several gatekeepers, media gatekeepers, having the authority also to select which kind of news are relevant for a broader audience. So we had newspapers, we had the television, but this was very much dominated by few companies or state broadcasters that would have either like private interest, or also like much more the interest of general education, political education, political dissemination of useful factual news. And they also provided, okay, what is the discourse? On which topic is this discourse? Like the advent of the Web 2.0, so the fact that everyone, him or herself, can become a publisher today by using interactive platforms, social media platforms as we all know them in the context of Facebook, Twitter back then. Yeah, also YouTube and messenger services. So we have a variety of possibilities to publish ourselves content. So without that, there is a kind of control on the one hand on the factuality or on truth, but also on relevance and the question of what could be helpful for democracy also in terms of having a discourse that is not antagonistic, but that is on the variety, on the presentation of a variety of positions where you can make your own conclusions out of this. So this should be a central issue of democracies, that to make your own conclusions out of a factual basis. So we see that this has changed a lot, that we have, for the good and for the bad, today actors that communicate around media gatekeepers. This can be good, of course, for marginal groups that have also been oppressed in certain societies, that can express much more freely. But it is also, of course, the possibility for manipulative actors to use these platforms to, on the one hand, polarize political debates, and on the other hand, also use measures of manipulation to distort also what is seemed to be an open discourse. So we see more either open or like more in the shadow, that we have metrical manipulations, so that there is a use of fake account, sock puppets, or that there is a kind of coordinated online activism behind that seems to create a kind of relevance for far-right positions in the political mainstream. And so this is something that changed very much the position of far-right actors, as they are on the one hand much more visible through digital activism, but on the other hand also seemingly like more representing a broader mass, which can be, as I said, very much manipulated through the metrical manipulation. We see, secondly, that once we had a central political party, as we had it in fascism, for example, with a clear leader, that this changed a lot, also because digitalization was creating much more diverse forms of political activism. So we have much broader landscape of parties, movements, subcultures, influencers that often have very a very distinct agenda. So it is not that there is a very strong coordination always between the different actors, but we see that they contribute to the same kind of impulse in political discourse, so which is pretty much to delegitimize democratic procedures, to scapegoat certain minorities, and also to silence critical voices. So this is something that we see is not very much a plan from top down, but it's a more bottom up process here. Very different actors of very different motivation participating in these kind of discourse dynamics. So when we would like to have a kind of representative figure, it is not the party anymore, the hierarchical party with a leader, but it's much more the swarm of very different participants that is creating a kind of chaos where we have a very strong emotional communication that is targeting effects rather than political reasoning. So this is something that also changed. And third change, or at least in part, is also the kind of attitudes. How do political movements from the right, from the far right, present themselves? Before, it has been like a very strong, disciplined movement that is guided by leaders. So there would be a much stronger socialization in organizations, a much stronger hierarchy, much clearer roles being played. And we see recently, like in the last 10 years, that today, like an entry point to far-right ideology is much more like digital subcultures. Like digital subcultures quite fluid, unorganized, anonymous. So we, for example, in the image boards of 4chan, probably you've heard of this, being active like in trolling and memeing. So these are digital practices that are like an entry gate into political activism. And this is very different to before, where you had to apply to membership, where you had to prove your ideological steadfastness, where you had to prove also through political action that you are part of a gang, of a subculture, or of a movement. So this today we have it much more individualized, which also has the consequence that it is much more difficult to identify and monitor also what is today far-right extremism, what are the actors, and where can we find them. So it is much more dispersed through different platforms, and much more difficult to forecast where threats are coming from. So this was also like my colleague Holger Marx and I wrote a book in 2020 on this. We called it Digital Fascism. I don't want to go too deep into this, but what we followed from this was also like, okay, if we want to track also what's going on, we need also the help of automated methods to get a clearer issue on trends, on discourse dynamics, on the question of networking, on to also better identify upcoming actors or narratives that we need to deal with. So we built this kind of research unit where we monitor. We have a constant monitoring of especially Telegram, the platform Telegram. I know that it's also famous in Brazil in certain contexts. Here in Germany, it is the central anchor of every far-right actor. So everyone has a channel there. It's a kind of archive, also a kind of a backup if other social media accounts are being deleted or banned, like from more mainstream platforms. And what we did here was we collected relevant actors from the field, around 200, 250, that were distinguished far-right, and we snowballed from there. So we used different platforms and looked, okay, let's see who's linking to which account, and let's see which kind of broader network we can build. And we have now at this point around, in the German-speaking context, around 4,000 to 5,000 Telegram channels, more or less relevant. And from this kind of network, we have 2,000 classified. So we try to identify different submilieus of far-right extremism. So you see it like in this context. So we see basically also like that there is around 450 channels on far-right extremism, but we see a much larger like bubble in quotation marks that is much more into conspiracy theory. So this is a trend, a recent trend, where we cannot say exactly, okay, they are ideologically based in a certain far-right submilieu, but they share a lot of extremist conspiracy theories. QAnon, for example, we had the anti-vax movement, the Querdenken in the context of the pandemic. We have a lot of esotericism here and disinformation on COVID. And so this was all one milieu. What interests us here more is the right-wing extremist milieu. So I go a bit deeper to show you that we have around, I mean, broadly speaking, 6 different submilieus that we distinguish here. So we have most easily identifiable cluster of neo-Nazis. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm right. That is characterized by a positive reference or sympathy to National Socialism in Germany. So, and the really racist worldview. So we see especially that we have it in much more subcultural context. So in football hooliganism, in music subcultures, but also like in martial arts, which is a very recent, like a global trend also in the far-right context, that we have those activists like organizing in fight clubs, for example. So they are quite easy to identify. We have you have it here translated, Cidadãos do Reich, the Reichsbürger, which is a very special phenomenon here in Germany. So this is a kind of submilieu which considers the Federal Republic of Germany as non-representative for Germans. So the government has no right to exist in their worldview, but in their worldview, the German Reich, as it existed until 1945, is still existing. So there is just like a puppet government controlling us here. This is the argumentation which is controlled by foreign powers. Interestingly, this milieu has very strong connections to the QAnon conspiracy theory here in Germany. We have the more organized extreme right, so especially parties and movements who deny liberal democracy and have an ideology based on inequality and authoritarianism. So we have political parties like the NPD, who's now called Die Heimat, the home. We have more extreme street-based political parties like the Third Way, Dritter Weg. But we also include here, and I know we can discuss this later, but the Alternative for Germany. So the political party that once started in a populist, it's a populist party, but radicalized very strongly, is a very important player, especially in the east of Germany. So like polling around 25 to 30%. So we observe them also quite closely. Then the fourth submilieu is the new right. I know you also have similar intellectual circles that are influencing far-right politics. So we have this in Germany, especially with the identitarian movement as a more activist arm of this, but we have also like think tanks, discussion circles, and so on, newspaper or like magazines, a lot of activism and of the new right is around activism, is around magazines that are being published that should in the pre-political space intervene in the pre-political space, trying to change like the basic conditions of political culture. So this is the idea of gaining cultural hegemony in the context of metapolitics. So a lot of cultural politics has been done here, and intellectual work where political parties and movements can jump on. So this is the idea. And we have like a more rest cluster of populist right. So this is diverse Islamophobic, racist actors, the right-wing worldview, who put the corrupt elite governing us against the true people. So this is a classical way of defining populism as well. And what we see here is they would not use violence, for example, or anti-democratic measures to topple a democratic system. So what we did, and I invite you, I cannot go into, I think it would be too complicated to move there, but we check like how these different clusters are interacting with each other. So we do this over time. So if you check like the dashboard that we are using, I invite you for this. I think you don't need too much German speaking knowledge, but you can also see, and this is what we see in these two pictures, in these two screenshots, like how over time the clusters are getting more and more dense. So we see, we can empirically show that the connection is getting much more closer between the different milieus, but also that we see more and more here in the middle, for example, it's a bit small, sorry for this, but that there's also Russian disinformation has a very strong and central position here, like in every different submilieu. So this is also something that connects the different actors with each other. So, but we use it and we provide it also to our partners, these insights to check deeper. Okay, where is who is this actor? What is he talking about? Which are the links he's spreading? So you can see this for all the 1,900 actors on this dashboard, but I think it would go too deep to show you around. So what we also do is, as I said, we look at the kind of networking. Okay, how densely are these actors connected? Who are the bridge builders between different milieus? I think this is also a very important issue. But we also look through topic modeling, which kind of actors use which different topics, and so we can choose here, for example, like it's also on our website, and we see that neo-Nazis are talking much more about protest issues. We can go deeper. Sorry, it's in German, but this is what we also provide in our analysis then, and say, okay, we can see very strong differences between different actors. For example, if we look to QAnon, we see, of course, much broader conspiracy part of what is been talking about, and we can also go deeper and to see, okay, which are the QAnon topics that are being discussed. It's about finance, it's about Satanism. So this is basically what we also provide to our users and readers. And yeah, this is also what we try to look is our work to see, okay, how do trends evolve over longer periods. So we see, for example, here, like the topic of migration, we can see that it didn't play such a role in 2021 in Germany. So back then we were in the pandemic. There was basically very few migration because the borders were closed due to due to the measures being taken by European states. But we see very strongly like that this was evolving after the end of the pandemic, and we see also which actors are the first ones taking on this issue and pushing also migration issues, which is a new right here, for example, which shows that they are the most strategic actors here, and that they are the ones always a bit ahead of some issues that are later also being adapted in different issues, in different milieux. Yeah. So I want to go a bit deeper, and this was a bit like also just to show you which is the data set we are working with, and I try to bring you to introduce you to three of our like deeper focuses that we are working on. So the first one was that we were looking on the protest mobilization. So which role does especially Telegram plays in the mobilization to protests? And what we can see very broadly is that especially in the context of the pandemic, we had a really new dynamic here in Germany. So this was unprecedented, especially in far-right context, that we had on a every week basis several hundred demonstrations all over Germany. And it was very difficult for police, for researchers, but also for civil society to track who is calling for demonstrations, who is going to demonstrations, which are the issues and the narratives, and also where is it escalating, and who are the actors behind. So this was in a really accelerated mode of different actors being part of this mobilization. And we had also the fact that during the lockdowns, we had 2 lockdowns in Germany in 2020 and 2021, where it was also forbidden to assemble outside. So that was also the time where people gathered in ever smaller cities, and were calling for strolls. So they were making walks through the cities, supposedly unpolitical, but of course there was a political mobilization, which didn't go like through posters and flyers as we knew it like from pre-digital context, but this was all basically through Telegram. So every especially from the anti-vax movement, the Querdenken, every local branch had its own Telegram channel where they mobilized. And this was always the first way to go. You would also hear in demonstrations, if you want news, if you please update yourself on Telegram. So it was always, they would always connect you to this platform. So we see also in this context that as the more the protest moved to smaller cities, the more it was also actors who were not so much, didn't have so much experience in far-right context. So there were some organizing their first demonstrations. They were using, like they had speeches where you could see, okay, there is very few political experience, but this was a moment, a special momentum for a lot of individuals to get into politics and to also into far-right politics. So this was interesting to see also like how new actors established actors had to adapt to new dynamics coming really from bottom up. And so it was our ambition to bring a bit order in all this. So what we did is we built a classifier. So we had several students and we trained them to identify in a larger corpus of text to say, okay, is this a call for demonstration or not? And we should know that in these contexts, it's not just, okay, go to the demonstration, but it's more like, okay, we meet at the supermarket at 5 o'clock. And this would be a call for demonstration, for example. And so we had a corpus of, I think it was 25,000 sentences that we were annotating if they were like demonstrations, not demonstrations. And so we could automate the classifier in much larger data sets of 10 million messages to see, okay, where do we see the calls for demonstrations. We could see who are the actors who are calling for demonstrations, where do they call, in which cities, and when do they call. And so we could make like this kind of these statistics to see, okay, when was the time, okay, where we had the most calls for demonstration. And we see that there's always a correlation between different political events that happen in Germany. I cannot go too deep into this, but you can see that especially here we had the harsh restrictions in the context of a lockdown. So there was a debate in Germany in end of 21, as you see that it goes really up, that unvaccinated people wouldn't have the same rights on the workplace, for example, and there would have been massive consequences if you're not vaccinated, for example. This was, in the end, it was a debate and there was no consequence in Germany. So this idea of a mandatory vaccination was very quickly dissolved also by the government, but it was mobilizing a lot, and we had very unusually around the change of years of 2021 to 2022. So around Christmas, we had the really most peak of until 3,000 calls for demonstrations in 1 week. So it doesn't always mean that a call for demonstration results into mass mobilization, but it gives you an indication that there is a willingness to mobilize. It doesn't mean, of course, that it's always that there's always the same expression on the street. So that just because a lot of people are calling, it doesn't mean that there are a million people responding. But we could see here clear peak also like on the streets around New Year's Eve, around these weeks where we had really strong mobilizations, and also the government took some ideas that they wanted to have a bit back. And yeah, we had in this context very radical and extreme expressions also. Those we had also an attempt also to run, and I know you have experience of this in Brazil. It was after we had it in the US, where the parliament was stormed by protesters. We had an attempt in Germany, and we had also one in Brazil. So maybe this connects also a bit. And we see a diffusion of protest measures, also a kind of inspiration here, like from the US especially. And so there was a lot of security issues involved here. But one should also say that most of these protests have been peaceful and also quite small, which is also, just to show you a bit like how the protest moved from the big cities, so in the densely populated cities in green here, to much more intermediately and thinly populated areas. So we had especially it was pretty much establishing like this every week routine of going on Mondays, especially in the east of Germany, on the street. So the Mondays has a historical relevance. When there was the communist regime in the GDR, this was also the beginning of the end, where the Monday demonstrations. So these protesters were like connecting to this revolutionary movement, peaceful revolutionary movement in the East. And so this was establishing very much on a 3-year basis, so that we had in some cities and villages even like a weekly activity, which was unprecedented until then, because most of the protests is basically concentrating in larger cities. So you see here like how we were also trying to locate. I hope you can see how this moves now, that this is a time series, and we can also see in blue these are clearly far-right actors that are calling for demonstrations. And we see, as you can see now in a second, that it's especially in the East. This is now the peak, as you have seen it before. And we see much more like in red. This is especially in the South. And these are especially the anti-vax movement. So we could also, with our data, like distinguish where we had a stronger far-right mobilization, where we had a stronger anti-vax mobilization here. And so could see that the anti-vax issue was very strongly taken up by far-right actors, or much more successfully taken up by far-right actors in the East. and while in the West we had quite much more diverse and more conspiracist demonstrations than in the East. Yeah. So this was a little insight into what we did on protest mobilization. I see I have just 10 more minutes. Probably I skipped one of the two to not run too far. So I would skip the monetization issue. Maybe we can go for questions later, but this is basically just to have a few words on this, that we were here looking that we are today, or like in digital context, it's the first time that you can earn money, like with spreading hate, basically. So this is something that wouldn't be possible before in pre-digital times. So mostly if you were a far-right activist, you would have really big problems in gathering or in accumulating money. So I think it's different in different contexts and countries where you had different financiers. But in Germany, it was also, you were marginal, you had political repression, and you wouldn't have the idea of getting rich with political activism. But this changed. There's a lot of influences in Germany. I'm aware that it's in Brazil similar, who get monetized through the content creation, through the online content creation. And we see, we tried in this study to see, okay, who tries to monetize the activism through which kind of ways. So we diversified affiliate links, like cryptocurrencies and bank, like it's very often that they share their bank connection for donations. We have donation platforms, donation websites, shops, and streaming. So we try to look deeper inside what we can learn from here, and especially also in the Bitcoin context. So this is very interesting. You would imagine that Bitcoins are very secure and safe. They are, but once you publish the identity of your wallet, and you make a connection between your name and the code of your wallet, then you also have it very openly to see, okay, how much money is going into your wallets. And it's not too much. We were surprised. We expected much more money that is running around. So 700,000 euros we could identify that have been shared in 89 different wallets that have been promoted by 133 channels in our data set. And we could see that there are some influencers. I don't want to make them more prominent than they are now here, but there are some who get some money, like 65,000 euros. It's okay for 2 years, I would say, probably because it's not the only financial source, but we could also get a feeling how much, who are like the big players also in the Bitcoin game, and how relevant is this also in this context. I want to use the last 10 minutes around to give you, because this is also like a research that I did for many years. It's a question of which role do memes play in communicating far-right ideologies, and we made also like a quite extensive study here. So just give you some ideas. Like I don't think I have to explain anymore. I hope so. At least what a meme is. I think we all use memes for everyday communication. This is also why they are so relevant. For our purposes here, we defined memes especially as a connection, or like here of images and text. So we have a text-image combination, which also has a new, or like can generate new meanings. We have, of course, a very strong connection to popular culture in memes, and we see that they played for many years, especially also in in violent extremist context, a very crucial role in communicating also like hate in very easy language that is also compatible to much more everyday communication. And what we tried to do is in our data set to see who sorry, now I have to, which are the groups especially targeted by hate memes in far-right context, which narratives, visual elements, and styles are used in these memes, and also like which are the memes who spread most. And this was something that we tried to to analyze on a very broad database, and we did this by a kind of selection process, which was quite complicated. I don't want to go in too deep, but we had in our data set 8.5 million pictures that we downloaded, and we used also like machine learning here to cluster like potential meme candidates. So we went deeper and deeper. We used our categories that I explained to you in the beginning of different submilieus, okay, that we have a kind of equal distribution of visual content. And in the end, we had around 40,000 images that we classified, and we asked, especially we worked with students again, is this a meme, yes or no? And can this meme be read as derogatory against certain targeted minorities or groups? And so we were interested especially in anti-Semitic, in misogynistic, in LGBTQ hostile, in Islamophobic, and in racist imagery. So which memes are being used to target the different groups. And we had different steps of going deeper in the analysis. So when it is, for example, misogynist meme, what kind of narrative stands behind there is we had, as I show you in a second, very different narratives being communicated here, and this also shows a lot how memes are being used to attack women, for example, or like especially to have a sexist and machist way of communication here. We looked in another step at the rhetorical strategies. So we know, of course, that humor is a very central way of meme language. So this humor is always building bridges. It's somehow decentivizing against certain more radical expressions and also language, and humor is connecting. If you laugh, so there's a saying around far-right activists: if your enemy is laughing about you, so this is the first step that you can convince him. So this is also like very central, as we also found out empirically. But we also saw like indignation, the victimization of the own group is very strong. So we have very different rhetorical strategies also being used in memes. And what we also did is to try to find out which subconscious elements are in memes. So to see, okay, is there a connection if you express hostility towards LGBTQ people? Are there the same elements being used, the same backgrounds, the same natures, objects, symbols? So this was something that we also tried to find out. And in the last step also, how is this aesthetically translated? I don't want to go in too deep. It's only in German, unfortunately, published. We work on an English translation. But what we found out is that it was especially extreme right channels, and I showed you like in this submilieu who share the most derogatory memes, but that we have in populist context, those who are the most stereotypical ones. So we have especially stereotypical ones against women who have certain elements of negative stereotyping, but do not always have, let's say, a hateful or even a violent component. So we see a very strong difference in the terms of communication here. And then they are much stronger used rhetoric strategically in near-right context than they are, for example, like in much more like conspiratorial context. What we've seen, like in absolute terms, is that most of the memes have a misogynistic characteristics. So 31% of all the derogatory memes had a misogynistic background. So I should just say it was during the time frame of January 2022 and June 2023. I think the time frame is always very important if we think, for example, that anti-Semitism has 18% in this context, but I would assume, like after the 7th of October, this would have changed, like that we would have different numbers in anti-Semitism, and this very small percent of 6%, which was anti-Muslim hate, this would probably be very different in today's political context. So this is, of course, very context dependent, the way that these memes are shared. What we also see is that we have different forms of derogatory language against groups together. So we find a very strong and not surprising connection between racism and anti-Muslim hate, but also between racism and misogyny, which was interesting for us to see. And on the other hand, we see like anti-Semitism is this category which is the most isolated. I mean, which is the one that is often not combined with different forms of group-based hate, as we found here. Next. So, okay. I told before that we also differentiated different narratives. So this is what we found out in misogynistic memes, that we indeed had the largest category of narratives that the women are depicted as stupid or are as sex objects for men. So this is very negative stereotypes of women. So for example, we see here, and this is a bit manipulated here to not show you to not have the full picture and not share the meme as it is, but it's a naked woman here asking if the guy at the door can come later because she's just paying the bill for electricity. So this shows it's a very stereotypical way, negatively, with a very strong sexualization of women, which is being shared, and which also shows who's sharing, and also gives us a hint about who's the target group, or like who's the audience of this. So we see Telegram especially, and in contrast to different meme platforms who use much more meme language, we see meme images here very strongly in a kind of boomer generation, which some memes you could, or this was had elements of amateurism, which is being shared much more strongly. Also, like if they are made in a very amateuristic way, and also like they should reach, especially of course, a generation which is maybe not digital native, but has a very like, let's say, banal way of communication. So this was one result that we were surprised of, that it was not as it was expected, the very extremist ways of communication, but it was this everyday racism, everyday sexism that has been spread most over here. So I think I'm running a bit out of time, but I just want to show you like that we also try to find out, okay, which political which category goes along with which elements. So we see here, for example, hostility towards LGBTQI people, and we see a strong connection also like depicted here with children especially. So we see children in memes being under threat of LGBTQI ideology. So, and this is being expressed in very concrete and emotional forms here. So to argue with children is also something that goes that goes has very strong effects in a way of reading images and of having like a threat towards the family and towards the family also like being a symbol also for the nation. So we see this that the traditional family is under attack, and this is a very strong image that we find in these memes. So I could have gone much deeper, of course, if I would have the time, but just to show you like this was just to show you some impressions of how far-right groups are using memes. So basically, it was just a representative sample that we had. That if we now like extrapolate like this data, we would have like a kind of data set of around 28,500 memes per in 1.5 years. So this is a massive production basically. This of course always gets easier and easier to make your images yourself, but it's a very central way of communicating. We see very subtle forms of devaluation that they are much more prevalent in our data set, and we have very clear forms of violence and extremism. So this is really the exception of the violent extremism. And we also learned that Telegram in Germany especially, but also I think beyond, so like the spread of memes is depending on the functioning of the platform. So in the context of for example, Twitter and so on, it's much easier to forward memes, and it's algorithmically curated. And Telegram is a platform where we have like a chronological way of communication. So you wouldn't have the same content being displayed in your feed like after it has been, repeatedly. It's just once in your feed. So we see that there is a much fewer circulation of memes than we have on other platforms. But it is our best data access to have that we had. And so we could at least see that they are used in these contexts much more selectively than they are used probably in other contexts and other platforms. And as I said, like we were really surprised, especially in the aesthetics, that this was very much boomer aesthetic and not so much what we would call meme culture today. Okay, I try to wrap up quickly. So this was to give you insight on tracing like far-right activism in Germany online, which are, I think you've seen some ways how we can come closer to our research of the object, but also I think we also are aware of some hurdles that we see. This goes especially that we have such a variety of far-right actors beyond so different platforms that it's really difficult to keep track. We have questions of data access, which is very differently organized by the platforms, and it's also like that we have more and more formats that go away from textual communication to audiovisual context communication, which makes it much more difficult to analyze them on a large scale. So what can we say about like 1 million TikTok videos? what is, can we really make, can we have clear statements, what is working, what is not, and how does it change, and so on. We see that also, I mean, I didn't talk about this yet, but we can also move to the discussion that it's much more difficult to also intervene in these contexts. That's from a political and civil society perspective. We have platforms that operate under their own guidelines. We have very few access, also especially to foreign, like Telegram, a digitally nomad platform, and yeah, this makes it very difficult also to somehow intervene in context where you have also like violent and extremist context being shared. And yeah, what is also like a next step that we are taking is, especially now we have elections here in Germany in different states, so on the state level, where we see much more the use of AI being used for image production, for propaganda, for deepfakes, and so I think this will again probably, this is a negative outlook in the end, but that we have a really much stronger automation also in the production of extremist materials, and that it would need much newer and much more nuanced ways of analyzing them. All right, thanks a lot for your time and attention, and you can check our reports at Machine Against the Rage, machineversusrage.net, or this QR code. And I'm here for questions, and also afterwards, if you have you want to contact me, feel free. And thanks for your attention. I think we cannot hear you, Liriam.
Yeah, Liriam? No. Não estamos ouvindo, Liriam. Okay. Can I go? It's okay? Okay. Can you hear me, Mike? Okay.
Yes.
So Okay, can I share my screen, Lydia? My screen? I think I will try to share my screen. Wait 1 minute. It's not possible. Ok.
Querendo partilhar? Compartilhar?
Isso. Olha se vai dar certo.
Deu certo.
Deu certo?
É, ele tá bem...
Tá pequeno?
É pequenininho, né? Se você puder abrir mais ele... Não. Eu falo a janela. Isso.
Assim?
Isso.
Isso? Tá, então eu vou colocar aqui na outra tela. Continuam vendo?
Aí melhorou.
Tá, então eu vou ficar aqui nessa tela, fica mais fácil para mim, para ver vocês. So, first of all, I'd like